Good morning. My name is Dr. Sam Hay, and I'm looking forward to working with you in this subject, GEO 203, Global Resource Consumption and Security, and in preparation for the tasks and assignments that you do in this subject, and also in preparation for teaching geography more generally. Geography is very important as one of the key humanities subjects, along with history and literature. Geography helps students to understand the world around them, how it works, how it shapes the future. Teaching geography in school is essential because it develops critical thinking skills, global awareness, problem-solving skills, similar but different to other subjects such as science and maths, economics, all of which are important. But geography is particularly important in helping us to understand the global and local distribution of the different activities that are taking place. In an era of climate change, resource scarcity, economic globalization, geography is particularly important. And it's always been important. That is, people have always asked questions as to where are the resources that we need? Where are the animals, the plants? Where are the other natural resources, the minerals? For thousands of years, people have asked these questions because it impacts all of us. It also relates to natural disasters. Why do they happen? How do we prepare? It relates to climate and food and water and energy and how they change over time. And it relates to questions as to why some struggle in accessing these resources and others have more ample supplies of them. This relates to sociological questions of the rich and the poor. It relates to economic questions as to how economies work, and it relates to real life questions. That is, how do we flourish within the world in which we've been born into? Geography is not just about theories, it's about everyday life of those elements that are around us that help us to flourish and do well. That is, where do our jobs come from? Where is our housing opportunity? Where does our food and our petrol? Where do we move if we're going to flourish and do well? What about the natural world around us? Why is it important to prepare it, to preserve it, to look after it in order that we might do well? Why are the seas and rivers important? Why are the forests and trees important? Why are the minerals important? Where are they located and how might we use them? Geography encourages thinking, critical thinking and problem solving that can be applied in every area of life. It encourages global citizenship, and whatever culture you're a part of, or religious tradition or Christian tradition you're a part of, geography connects to those responsibilities that we have been given to look after the resources that are around us well and to share them well and to preserve social justice and caring one for another. Geography prepares us for jobs and opportunity, not just in urban planning, sustainability, environmental science and conservation, business or trade or economics, disaster management, climate research, politics or global development. It prepares us for opportunities in every job and also in teaching, which you and your students may go into. It's multidisciplinary in that it connects with science and ways of measuring and evidence-based information. It connects with mathematics and data analysis. In the first assignment in this subject, we ask you to look carefully at the value of data and data analysis and use of mathematics in geography. It connects also with technology and ways we gather information and how we can use aeroplanes and satellites to take photos or other ways of mapping what's happening in a spatial dimension geographically. It connects with history and the change over time and connects with economics and politics and lots of other subjects as well. Geography helps to make students ready for their future, and it prepares them to solve not only global problems but also the challenges faced in everyday life, in communities and in the world in which we live. And in assignments 2 and 3, you're asked to think about some local communities in those areas around you and how your insights from geography can help make a better world for the local towns and cities and geographic areas that you live in. So what is geography? Mostly, it looks at spatial dimensions rather than history through time. Mostly, it looks at the distribution of plants and animals and environments and people and their economic relationships and housing and workplaces, rather than measuring the chemistry of materials or measuring movement through physics or astronomy. Geography looks at the spatial world around us as part of the many sciences that help us to understand the world in which we live. It includes physical geography, which look at the landforms, the mountains, rivers, deserts, and seas, climate geography as weather changes, ecosystems, the way in which the plants and animals work together, and there are cycles that can occur in the natural world with weather and with the plants and animals that keep them flourishing. And then particularly important is the way in which people settle besides rivers and oceans and ports in order to establish flourishing urban environments in which people can develop economies and businesses and trade in order to do well. But particularly important is the need to preserve the environment around us and to be aware that climates can change, pollution can be a challenge, and we need to have sustainable developments which enable us to flourish and to do well. So in this subject, we will focus on resources and global and local resource consumption and security in order for our places in which we live to flourish and do well. And this will flow over into individual lives and how people economically think about the resources that they've been given and the opportunities and jobs they've been given and how they fit in with others all around them, particularly in a geographic spatial way, as opposed to a historical or other scientific ways of examining what is going on. We're going to focus on resources such as water and energy, fossil fuels and minerals, forests and plants and animals, and the ways in which these natural resources are distributed in particular ways that if we can preserve and care for, we will do well. But if we have vast monocultures through our farming and allow pests and disease or depletion of resources to come in, then difficulties can arise and we need to understand them ahead of time. And if massive difficulties arise because of a pollution like carbon dioxide or methane and temperatures rise and the environment changes, we need to be ready and aware in order to help people to do well. I know I've met some people from low-lying areas in the Pacific and in other countries in which the water rising is beginning to cover their land and there's not much future, and so they have to ask, how are we going to go forward for our children and grandchildren? Do we need to migrate? Are there ways to preserve the world in which we live? Because water levels rising, weather changing can be a real challenge for people all around the world. It can be a challenge too with changing food systems. How are we going to continue to produce enough food for an increasing number of people? And since the 1800s through to our present time, populations have increased many times, 5 to 8 or more times, from 1 billion people to 6 or 7 or more billions of people, consuming more, producing more pollution, turning more of our forests into flat landscapes that are growing monocultural foods. Energy consumption is increasing. Even from 100, 200 years ago, people consume a lot more energy in their houses and families than they did. And so there's a lot of challenges that are being placed on our local and larger national and global ecosystems that we need to address. Every local environment has challenges in gathering enough water, which can have too much at sometimes with a flood, and then water scarcity at other times. And this may lead to desalination plants and dams and ways of storing water. And then there can be conflict over who can access this water. The farmers, does the environment and the fish and the animals need the water? How do we handle the water well? Particularly important is questions of fuel, in that we've moved away from timber for cooking to oil and petroleum and natural gas and coal as major sources of energy in the 1800s for trains and steam trains, and now in our own time for aeroplanes and trucks and other forms of transport. Massive consumption in the last 100 or 200 years, which has huge implications for our environment and how we live and how we flourish and do well, or the challenges that we face, and the challenge to establish clean, renewable energy and various alternatives to that. So all around us are questions of resources and how we use them well, and how we avoid exploitation and abuse of them and loss of these resources. All around us are questions of recycling and reducing waste and reusing resources that can help us to flourish well. So why does geography and study of resources matter? It matters because a sustainable world around us can help us to flourish and do well. It matters because political and local stability and flourishing depends on handling our resources well. It matters because if we develop management skills in whatever jobs and occupations we have that care for our environment and use them well, we and our businesses can flourish. And it matters because we want to pass on a healthy world to future generations. So we're going to study 6 areas, 6 modules. Firstly, we're going to look at resources. What are the resources that we depend on and depend on most, with a focus on energy and water and food? And how are these resource users changing, particularly from 1800 to 1900 to the present time, where populations have increased, the amount of consumption has increased, and so we have challenges and pollution problems and shortages that we are facing. And what are the global patterns and trends? And why are some people benefiting more than others? And how can we ensure that everyone has enough resources to flourish and do well? With a focus on water, we will ask how we can best harness and use water so that we continue to do well. With a focus on energy, how can we use energy resources well, oil and gas and other sources of energy? How can we continue to have a sustainable supply of foods? And how does the water, energy, food nexus and relationship work together? Global networks and local networks can be studied, and we're going to ask you in your assignments to focus on some local areas around you, such as a local town or local geographic area or a local area in which you live, or you might be teaching in where your schools are. How can the study of these local resources help you to do well? We want to also look at the way as teachers, how we can make our teaching of resource development and geography interesting. We want to build a resource and a file, and I encourage you each week to gather resources and put them in a computer file or another place where you can use them in the future and show them for jobs that you apply for, that show that you're well equipped to teach geography. Gather some case studies that you feel are most relevant and that you're most interested in. You could write about them in your assignments for this subject. You could investigate them further, such as real life examples of water security. How do we gather and use enough water locally? People may have water tanks and water gathering supplies in their houses. You could ask your students, how do you ensure you reduce your reliance on the town water, reduce the costs that you're paying for this, and then in the town and in the city and in the region, how do they build dams and handle water consumption in various ways? In what ways are students using renewables and also taking steps to reduce pollution and reduce plastics and other consumables that are making the environment more damaged? We can look at climate change and how that influences local people. What are the heat waves doing? What's the rising temperatures? And many have recorded that the last 10 years have been hottest on record, and this has brought challenges. How are students coping? How are their families coping? You could gather news articles, social media posts, documentary clips, YouTube clips, magazine and journal articles that you could use in teaching. And in your 3 assignments for this subject, you could add an appendix that could list some web addresses or list some of these resources to show how they could be used in the classroom. You could reflect on how change of resource use is impacting you, and you could also think about the ways in which students could follow similar examples. You could think of games and role playing that could show some of these resources. And I'm particularly interested in the game of Catan, which has a few resources like forest and minerals and sheep, and it looks at this use of the resources, and a number of scholars have written about the use of Catan and other resource games and activities and role plays in their classes. You can divide the class into countries, richer classes and poorer countries, and you could get the students to discuss and talk about the ways in which they handle the different resources. You could have a debate or a discussion as to who owns the resources and how should the different resources be prioritised and used. You could think of areas that you could travel to in your local area, field trips and maps that you could draw up of what is happening. You could find documentaries and podcasts and Netflix and YouTube that could be relevant. And then you could also look at gamification and games and online tools that could be useful. There's lots of ways in which you could make your classes more interesting and dynamic. You could have mock United Nations summits. You could come up with real life examples and simulations and gathering of media clips and studying them and looking at what the media are doing. There's lots of areas that you could focus on relating to resources, renewables, food security, water management. So we're going to encourage you over each of the weeks to engage with these ideas and to gather them and to put them together in order that you might do well, not only in the 3 assignments that are going to be covered, but also in your teaching and also in your life and every area of life in the years ahead. I look forward to working with you both now in this subject, but also at times ahead. If you ever want to get in touch with me now as you study, or at future times, I encourage you get in touch with me, Dr. Sam Hay, at gmail.com, and I'm very happy to continue to share with you some of these insights into geography and geography teaching and the importance of resources such as energy, water and food and other resources in our lives and in our teaching. Thank you.